Um, I had an interesting conversation with someone today. Which involved them suggesting the idea that sometimes people appear that the person suggested that people appear to have a parasocial relationship with um, doom scrolling or the internet type of thing. So um, the term parasocial is an interesting one, and the person who it turned out quite wise for suggesting such a thing. Is, however, a specific and complicated set of ideas on its own, and there are other contexts whereby that doesn't apply but can give the illusion thereof. So, um, let's look at certain types of contexts, okay? So, the context of the parasocial individual is basically a sick fan, okay? So, we're going to illustrate it very simply. They're a sick fan who has spent too much time listening to their favourite musicians' music, or their favourite movies, watching their favourite movie stars' movies, or their favourite sporting hero, or whatever, and they've got all posters of them up in their room and or through their house, and they've got, they just totally love everything they do, and then they know everything about them, and they're just totally obsessed with them, and then okay, and it goes too far, and then something snaps, right? They think they're in a relationship with them. Okay, so that part is obviously the delusional part, and we'll explain why that's delusional in the ordinary sense of the term. So, in the ordinary sense of the term, that's delusional because that person has primed their mind for however long they have beforehand to obsess over that individual. So it could be a musical band. It might not just be an individual. Depends what they're obsessed over. And spend the time in advance of that snapping behaviour becoming that way. So they've obsessed first, and then they've um, gone delusional afterwards. Um, when they get delusional like that, and it goes too far, and next thing you know, there was actually a story about this, about an incel type character in the United States who was a fan of a young lady who was an Instagram user, who was a popular influencer on there, or TikTok or something like that, and a young man was a fan of hers and watched all of her videos and presumably whacked off to her videos every now and then. And then he's sent her some text messages saying he loves her and they're meant to be together, and why won't you talk to me? And then he's gone and found a house and he's stalked her, and then he's broken in, and then, well, the next thing you know, her father's taken out a sawed-off shotgun and said, leave. And then the police are showing up, okay? So that would qualify as a parasocial relationship. That is a classic definition of one. It is a obsessional relationship that may lead to stalking or bad behaviour, okay, if left unchecked. So let's look at how that relates to male psychology. And even though there has been parasocial behaviour with some females, what is unique about male psychology that seems to have a pattern of associations that are more likely in male than female psychology, despite the obvious celebrity obsessed culture that everyone's drenched in. And obviously media and saturation obsessed. So let's have a look at that. Male psychology. There are some male individuals, not all, who might think that because he wants a person that they want him. So when he wants that person, he thinks that he is entitled to her. Usually it's a female that's the target. It's not always the case, but usually it is. And this is where the pattern, the normal description of parasocial relationships is the domestic violence stalking behaviour, um, and when it comes to celebrities and influencers and people like that who've been offended in such a manner, those people are experiencing an extension of some kind of stalking type domestic violence behaviour. So, in the case of the sort of more classic symptoms of it, you're talking about a bloke who liked her tits, and so he went home and he whacked off one day, and he thought, because it was really enjoyable, that, and his fantasy was very strong, that perhaps that she also liked him, because obviously when he was whacking off, he was fantasizing about her liking him. That, by the way, is a normal thing for whacking off men to do, is to think that the woman that he's fantasizing about also likes him. Otherwise, it wouldn't be a pleasurable experience for him. Unless he's a masochist of some kind. So anyway, so the male in question in that case has some kind of issue with operant conditioning, whereby he is associating strongly with the fantasy and the reward that comes at the end of how he's expressed and experienced that fantasy in the case of whacking off. So that creates a associative pair of a huge dopamine surge where he automatically thinks that if he believes that she wants him, then he feels better. And so he whacks off and he whacks off and he whacks off some more. Okay? Celebrities out there, you don't want to hear that, but that's what those men are actually doing. So they the dopamine surge leads to a sort of network of reinforcements that cause him problems. And then because he's unable to distinguish how operant conditioning works, and he's unable to distinguish his fantasies from reality, so he's got this base program independently of that where he seems to think that other people want the same things that he wants, then he runs into trouble when he discovers that that's not the case. So it's invariably the case that people who assume that everyone else wants what they want winds up in trouble. In the case of Elon Musk, he has a parasocial relationship with the general public. Okay, we'll explain that in a minute. Why Elon Musk exhibits signs of having a parasocial relationship with the general public. He has in the documentation available in videos, which have attempted to be discerned from the artificial intelligence ones, because obviously they're around too, and that does lead to some concerns about whether or not it's adequate source material. Anyway, suggests that he probably has a condition called schizotypal personality disorder. Now, in the case of schizotypal personality disorder, those people don't routinely have parasocial relationships with other people. They're often quite insular characters who like to stay by themselves. They're not more or less prone to stalking than anyone else. It depends on how they're affected and what's going on in their lives. In the case of Mr. Musk, autism appears to be an incorrect diagnosis because he has too much of a creative stage presence. His intelligence is associated with creativity. It's also, there is the gullibility component where he was a little bit too easily conned by Curtis Yarvin and Nick Hand's ideology and worldview to the point where he became the gullible fool that enacted it, while they sat in the background laughing, as the world obviously reacted with scorn and made Tesla go bankrupt, right? Which would suggest he might be autistic. He also could have schizotypal personality disorder. So in that particular condition, ketamine usage or abuse would lead to an increased risk of delusional symptoms. It's also the case that he was raised in a cult-like environment. So when it came to his grandfather, as in May Haldeman's father, co-founding the technocratic group or party or some other similar hard right party in Birmingham in Canada, and his mother was part of it, and therefore he was raised with it. And then with his father Errol and his mother, they've gone to live in South Africa because there was apartheid there. He was basically encultured in a cult-like environment that would have had given a toxic and confusing sense of entitlement, where he was both put down as well as told that he was Mr. Special. So what you probably noticed about the Elon Musk fan zones and videos and everything else going like that is that there's this cult of Elon Musk as Mr. Special. And it's a bit disturbing because when you actually see videos of the man behaving, um, there's obviously a mixture of responses depending on how sober he is and how well prepared his press conferences are. He appears to oscillate between arrogance in his body language and his attitudes and straight up schizophrenia. Okay, so what in one video, one video, he's saying to a man, Mr. Lemon, he might have been his name, Don Lemon or something like that. A reporter from the USA had a video of him and was saying, was trying to get quiz Mr. Musk on white male privilege was involved in his success, which, by the way, it was, considering his $28,000 seed money that he got to do Zip 2 with his brother came from that South African apartheid blood money. So there's that. It was, in fact, directly involved, intimately involved, ideologically involved, politically involved, socially involved, economically involved, and historically involved. And the ideology of Curtis Yarwood and Nick Cannon is also involved. They call it the Dark Enlightenment. So to say that there's none of that is obviously crap. So for someone who's aware of even a small part of that, watching that Don Lemon video, you might have the response of, okay, Don Lemon is making sense, and Elon Musk is showing in his response that he is blind to his privilege. Here's another way he was blind to his privilege, is he said, everyone wants to be Elon Musk. Everyone wants to be him. But that couldn't be further from the truth. They don't want to be that man. There isn't anyone who wants to be that man. Okay, they don't want to be that man at all. Okay, he was making an assumption about the general public that the general public simply does not have. Okay, he was coming from a position of entitlement and privilege when he said so. He assumed that the general public would be jealous of him, but they're not. They're genuinely unhappy that he did a Nazi salute on Martin Luther King Day at the presidential inauguration. They're genuinely unhappy that ransacking the OPM with AI algorithms and a bunch of hackers from SpaceX is being passed off as auditing, when that is not what the profession of auditing would do. There are, in fact, very stringent procedures involved in auditing that what they've been doing simply does not resemble. He has been encultured to believe, such as with the Dark Enlightenment ideas, that income is associated with IQ. Well, he became rich, therefore he's a genius. Well, that isn't true. He's a fool who got easily programmed by the men in his quarter. His father, his mother, the other tech bros. Okay? And someone like that is at risk of feeling narcissistically shamed and belittled, because he got told one story and the truth turned out to be another. He got betrayed by everyone that he knows. He got told a story to benefit them. They want him to be their fall guy, but they also want him to benefit somehow. They've tried to create him as their, the problem solved when he's shot character, a little bit like Donald Trump. So these are people who like to think that they're smart because they have lots of money, but they're not. They're people who've been allowed to, through narcissistic social dynamics, to become narcopathic characters. So that level of narcopathy is not associated with autism. That type of narcissistic reaction that everyone wants to be him is not an autism symptom. It is a symptom of someone who has been socially conditioned to believe that he's better than other people, and that other people in society agree with whatever enculturation he's received when they simply do not. And so that sort of schizoid type, no offense to people who are schizoid and don't share those values, but that type of break from reality in his mind and how he processes what he thinks and what he was told versus how the rest of society actually operates has become a big punch in his face with all those Tesla showrooms burning down. He even assumed that people would have only done that if they were paid to do it, rather than because they were genuinely pissed off. That's how far removed from reality he is in that subject alone. Let alone the other videos showing that he believes that we are in the middle of an apocalypse, and that's why he has to build rockets to go to Mars, and he has to populate Mars with all the smart people, and so he's going to populate Mars with all the smart people by impregnating as much, rich women as he can because they're the smart people. Okay, he's nuts. Okay, he's nuts. Okay? He's gone from being mild eccentric, which, by the way, no offense to anyone else with schizoid personality disorder, okay, out there, okay, that is not sanity. Okay, that is an assumption that he is better than other people and that they share his intentions. That's an assumption that he knows better than other people. He even had friends commenting about the Nazi salute. Apparently one commented and said that you probably shouldn't worry about Elon Musk being racist. He kind of rejected some of the programming he got from his background. What you need to be more concerned about is Elon Musk thinking that he's better than other people and he's the solution to all of the world's problems. There's your narcissism there. Okay? So where does narcissism and empathy come into it? Okay? Is he actually an empathic character who feels a deep moral concern for all that is and a deep responsibility to help others? Are you sure about that? If you look at the circumstances, some people would disagree. They'd feel quite disrespected, and rightly so. So, what's the solution to that particular crisis then? Well, the solution to that particular crisis is to dissect the kind of cult stuff that he's going through, because that cult stuff isn't quite the same as what your average parasocial stalker goes through. Okay? Your average parasocial stalker is a poor person, a poor man, who whacks off too much. The celebrity who's stalking everyone else makes a cult of celebrity around him by having oodles of AI videos produced by OpenAI or whatever to create a cult that suggests that he's a genius or whatever, and everyone has to know what he's doing and know who he's fucking and know everything about him. The community didn't ask for that information. Him and his associates produced it, and in association with the memetics of how social media works, it spread. But he had to put that there first. Take into consideration 5 or 10 years ago, you never heard of the prick. You probably never heard of him. But suddenly he's the richest man in the world and he's this and he's that and the other, okay? He's done that, not the public. And how the public have contributed to it is they've turned around and they've shared that social media, they've shared those influencers, those videos and stuff like that. And even like this video, commented on it, which contributes to that drama. So let's go back and differentiate that person who's stalking the general community with his crap and go back to the lonely guy who whacks off too much. What's the difference? The lonely guy who whacks off too much, he doesn't have a lot of friends because he's a bit of a stereotype of a loner. He's the one that gets diagnosed with schizotypal personality disorder. He doesn't have the social skills and the money to go and have AI companies make videos for him. He just watches the TV and pretends that Taylor Swift's his girlfriend or whatever. Oh, wait a minute. Didn't Elon Musk send unwanted text message, Twitter messages to Taylor Swift herself to say that he wants to make babies with her. Put that into consideration. Elon Musk exhibits a parasocial relationship with the community as a consequence of schizotypal personality disorder exacerbated by drug use. He just so happens to be in a social position where he can afford to make AI videos and whatever else to make it look like he's the celebrity that's being stalked. He's actually stalking everyone else. Take that into consideration. Now, additional cult information. For those of you who are into some of the conspiracy theories associated with different religious or spiritual cults, this one's going to be a corker for you. Here a person, we'll talk about Lonely Guy. Okay, Lonely Guy in that story, he's never studied Kabbalah. He's never practiced witchcraft. He's never done anything of the sort. He's just Lonely Guy. But he just so happens to have some perceptual issues due to his schizotypal issues. He happens to be in an environment, okay, in his neighbourhood perhaps, where there are practitioners of Wicca or Masonry or Theosophy or whatever it might be. Kabbalah. In the practice of Kabbalah, there are these things called sephirots, okay, or spheres. And they can be likened to, but are not the same thing, as containers for collective mind streams. So in those spaces, you can interact with lots of people. Okay? You interact with lots and lots of people. Okay? Now, in the world of spirits, okay, to use that analogy, spirits are not concerned about, that spirits exist whether or not you're a rich person or a poor person. The practice of that religion has got nothing to do with your social class. Okay? This is where Jim Carrey comes into it. Jim Carrey was a practitioner of Kabbalah, okay, with a Q. Okay, he was into chaos magic. They've updated his Wikipedia page, but 10 years ago it used to talk about the chaos magic and how he changed it from that to something else. If anyone knows about the history, he was actually a fan of Cannibal Corpse and even had them play at his birthday party once. So his association with chaos magic and Kabbalah is long term. He's recently had an image change in the last 10 years. This is relevant because Jim Carrey lived in Los Angeles in California and would have known other practitioners of that craft in the area. So even if the tech bros didn't practice Kabbalah, they were within an environment where it was possible for them to interact. Rich guys sometimes go to the same parties and meet each other. And so that increases the probability of interacting mind streams that way. Is it the case that Jim Carrey once met Elon Musk at a party? Or one of his associates, maybe Mark Zuckerberg or something like that? Was he in the throes of dealing with the collective mind streams of the Sephirots when he did? Did Keanu Reeves in his practice of Buddhism sit under the Bodhi tree one day with the collective mind streams in his head? Happen to deal with the schizoid symptom of, well, he's not really Neo. Well, he might have done that, except Keanu Reeves doesn't live in California. Keanu Reeves lives in New York City. So this is the awkward thing about when you find out these things about these celeb characters, is that you find out stuff like that. In Buddhism, you could potentially interact with multiple mind streams as well, because that symbolism of the Sephirots and the Tree of Life and Tree of Death is just that symbolism. It's not the truth of the situation. So if it were the case that schizoid guy who whacks off too much just happened to be, 3 or 4 doors up the road from a coven of Kabbalah practitioners that were experiencing the Sephiroths, they could potentially experience that man and vice versa through energy exchange. It was also the case that they could also experience other practitioners of Kabbalah overseas. And so the issue then becomes is, can you experience Kabbalistic information without ever having practiced Kabbalah? And the answer is yes, you can. In that worldview, you actually can. You can experience Kabbalistic information whilst being a Buddhist. You can experience Kabbalistic information whilst being a Christian. But what you need to do is you need to say that's just a symbolic map that doesn't mean anything. It's just another cult. And then you'll get somewhere. Because those people who are doing that are in fact interacting with stuff that is in fact hurting other people in their environment and sometimes overseas. So when you see that, now you start getting into the conspiracy theory territory of the hard right. Okay? In the hard right, there have been these conspiracy theorists who said that the Masons are doing it. It's the Jews and the Masons. They're the fucking problem. Except Jesus Christ is your Lord and Savior. It's like, well, no, don't do that, because those Kabbalistic forces through egregores interact with the mind maps and mathematics and memetics of the Jesus Christ stuff. And there's a lot out there, and it's pretty negative. Okay? You've got to stay away from that Bible as well to overcome that. Okay? So when it comes to this parasocial stuff, and which situation applies when, if that man never lived anywhere where there was any Kabbalah practitioners whatsoever, and simply was just an ordinary bloke who was kind of dumb, a bit on the dull side, whacked off too much, didn't comprehend his own mind and how operant conditioning works, maybe was affected by the microwave auditory effect, such as artificial radio waves hitting his head, potentially containing information about the TV show that someone's watching up the road. Okay? You're technically not supposed to be able to do that, but people have been known to do that. Okay? To experience radio waves with information on it. They might even learn how to decode the signals. Okay? We don't know why. Okay? Maybe it's the city. Maybe they're crazy. But let's assume that the advanced levels of the microwave auditory effect are a thing for a minute and see what that means. In that context, they don't have to do any spiritual practices at all or take any drugs. They can wind up with a crazy symptom that they misinterpret. Maybe even the celebrity in question practices Kabbalah and is bullying them. Or maybe there's someone else who knows about that and they'll pretend and pose to be as a celebrity to bully them. Whatever the case might be, you can rest assured that celebrity doesn't even know they exist in the physical sense of the term. They might have strange intuition about something, but that's all it'll be. Unless they're an awakened individual who's been sat under the Bodhi tree or done Kabbalah apparently, or some other similar practice that could have those consequences. So, when you want to deal with the parasocial stuff, you need to understand that Kabbalah, excuse the kettle, Kabbalah is practiced by parasocial people. Typically, the practitioners of hyper-religious behavior, such as Kabbalah or Christianity, are people who are resorting to religion to cover up for narcissism. And so narcissistic social conditioning. That doesn't mean that this spirits moving around and weird stuff isn't true, because it is. There is a long-standing tradition Not that you should appeal to tradition, because that's actually a logical fallacy, but there is a long-standing discussion by people of many different cultures going back thousands of years. And by the way, that's an appeal to popularity and appeal to antiquity as well. However, anecdotally, for a lot of people, they would say that's true. So if you've never practiced Kabbalah or any of those religions, but you've ever lived with someone who has, their practices might affect you. Okay? And then you might have to learn what it is to cope with what has affected you. That is a very distinct set of circumstances compared to, say, someone who's never done that and someone who was merely in the same neighborhood as someone who did that, and someone who has similar psychological male patterning to the male practitioners of Kabbalah, which is a toxic sense of entitlement, a sort of like an imperial invasiveness, a lack of respect for boundaries, a tendency towards delusions of grandeur or reference or whatever else. So the practitioners of Kabbalah are often insane people. And because they're insane people, if they affect someone who has particular tendencies, then that person can become insane as a consequence of their presence, which is quite an interesting way of looking at it. But to raise a point, though, in both cases, whether or not you're dealing with a genuinely independently parasocial person who is a domestic violence offender without any seer or magical issues or spiritual issues or microwave auditory effect issues or whatever, just an ordinary bloke who can't use that as an excuse, like maybe they've never had any reason to do that, then you might then turn around and say, okay, mate, okay, let's talk about your mum and dad. Did your dad flog you and call you a retard? Did your dad raise you to think that he was the boss of your mum? Were you mollycoddled? Were you breastfed a bit too much, maybe? How often in your life were you told no? And if you were told no, did you respond effectively? Were you told no in a way that was effective? Were you socially conditioned to believe in hierarchy? Were you socially conditioned to believe in the same kind of crap that Dark Enlightenment espouses? Authoritarian, bigoted bullshit. If you were encultured that way, parasocial man, okay, would you then translate that in a sort of like you want that Taylor Swift, do you, Elon Musk? Therefore, she's yours? Well, that's crap. She's not yours. And so that sort of domestic violence patterning that is found in Kabbalah practitioners is also found in the Dark Enlightenment ideology. It's also found in Christianity, and in the roots of both of those, which is Judaism, and found in Islam. It's also found independently of all that, and the psycho guy who was raised possibly in a domestic violence environment, who sits there and pretends his girlfriend lives on the TV. Okay, so one of the factors that you might want to discern that is, was that person actually a fan of that individual before they started carrying on? If they weren't and had never heard of them, then you're in some interesting territory. If they weren't a fan of that person and they never heard of them, but they had interacted with people who were practitioners of Kabbalah, then you might want to point your fingers towards the Kabbalah practitioners. If they had heard of that individual and even obsessed over it a little bit, then you might want to consider that a possibility. But in doing so, if there's also Kabbalistic variables involved, then which ones are they and where are they coming from? Because the male practitioners of Kabbalah are not nice people. If you have a look at Aleister Crowley, for example, that man's solution to the great demon Choronzon was the Whore of Babylon. I had to look that one up to figure out what those words meant. So, he thought that the way to solve the Choronzon issue was through the objectification and sexualization of women. So, Aleister Crowley was objectifying and sexualizing himself. He assumed that the Choronzon issue had nothing to do with what he'd done, but was more of a reflection of a need to fuck some Sheilas. He also assumed that women were therefore responsible for solving the dark magic practice that he'd done, which means he was placing the burden of responsibility on someone else and wasn't taking responsibility. In other words, he was acting like a fucking brat. And that type of mentality. That type of mentality is found in all the cults that followed from Crowley, from the Thelemites through the Wiccans, the Scientologists, aspects of the New Age movement that have those type of characteristics. Okay, Kabbalah, whether it's Crowley's version or another version, but in particular Crowley's version, is strongly associated with misogyny, with racism, with men not taking responsibility, with male schizoid tendencies, men not taking responsibility for their shit, projection, narcissism, misidentification, mislabeling, imperial and territorialistic behaviour, including invading other people's spaces. In other words, disrespect for boundaries. And the illusory correlations that came out of a complex experience that was only slightly better explained by Buddhism, but not completely explained at all. And that was taken completely out of context and framed in some kind of medieval Christian demonology and logic with a bunch of stupid pictures and astrology that makes no sense. I mean, the entire idea of Malkuth is to say that the only woman that exists is Lilith, who's the mother of all demons, and which is insulting to women. Like women, the only time a woman exists is if she lives inside a man's arsehole and she's demonic. If that's not projecting onto women the men's problems from their behaviour, don't know what is. So, at least, at this point, you don't have to believe in whether or not that stuff is true. What you need to understand is that there are people who do believe it's true. And those people, should they've experienced those things, would be difficult to convince that it's not true. Because people inherently know when they feel like themselves or not. And so if they're telling you they don't feel like themselves, then they don't feel like themselves. Okay? Elon Musk is probably himself in a plus scenario, because what he's done is he's tried to collect as many people as he can from around the world so that he could position himself as a divine character. Okay, Donald Trump's the same. They both have similar mentalities. You take that symbolically, not actually if you want to. It's probably better if you do. Nonetheless, these are people who actually actively objectify anyone who isn't them. Anyone who isn't just like them is an object, not a person. With the Musk Brigade and those tech bro buddies, they're people that build robots that look like women. Sometimes to service men sexually or to service otherwise, because they want to say that they can control women, body, soul and mind. They are domineering and controlling characters with severe personality dysfunction. And that type of mentality is found in the tech bros, it's found in 4chan, it's found in Anonymous, it's found in Elon Musk, and it's found in the parasocial men who have no technological skills, who have no practice of Kabbalah, who have no money, who just thought Taylor Swift was their girlfriend. And so, if at this point you're anyone out there who supports the practice of Western esotericism or Christianity alike, or thinks that those religions can be excused, then you are in fact a supporter of Elliot Rodgers. And once you come to understand what that means, about how the USA has been supporting Elliot Rodgers and people like Elliot Rodgers the entire time, then you will come to regret your religious and spiritual beliefs, your social and political beliefs, and you will look at that man with the parasocial idea with scorn. And you'll see Elon Musk for what he really is. A man who scorns everyone, who thinks everyone wants to be him, but they don't want to be him. Most people don't believe in the apocalypse, Elon Musk. Most people don't want it. They don't want to live on Mars. They don't think Elon Musk is smart just because he's got more money. They think he's fucktarded because he's on drugs. They think he's fucktarded because he can't be a fucking decent father. They think he's a pawn and a slave to the cult that he was raised in. They're not jealous of him. They pity him. They want him out of their government with his doggy coins. They want him out of their lives. They don't want to talk to him at all. And the same is true of Donald Trump. And the same is true of Jim Carrey and people like that. They actually don't want to deal with those people. For Australians, it's incredibly frustrating that you might want to look up Ozpol, right? Or Australian politics. But you can't get there without going through a huge pile of American filth. And it's difficult to avoid the doom scrolling, to avoid the looking at the content as it pops up in your notifications of, you might be interested in this. You can scroll for hours and not watch the video anyway. That search engine optimization to target people, to create demographics that are untrue, has included attempting to enculture people into the New Age movement. It's included attempting to drag people into Christianity. It's included attempting to drag people into Kabbalistic practices. It's included the AI videos of Elon Musk and Trump and whatever else. Okay? And so you don't like social media, don't use it, that's fine. That's perfectly okay. It's even well advised. But that's the truth of it. They created a culture where expectation of hierarchy was classified as normal, where wealth and beauty was classified as success, and if you had neither, then you're a failure. You had to desire wealth and beauty. So these parasocial men are men who want to be normal. They want to be more normal. They're programmed with the Baudrillardian map. They accept it as normal. They accept a bunch of delusions that go with it. Some of them they generated, some of them they did not. And then they want to be normal. Normalizing, have lots of money. They're the one without the money. They are slaves to social conditioning. They are slaves to operant conditioning. They're not people who know how to use it to fight those forces of evil for good. They are people who need to know how those forces of evil work, to be taught by the good. Society doesn't give you the answers that you need. Society does not give you the questions. The word Kabbalah means received wisdom. You shouldn't receive wisdom. If you were a wise one, you would comprehend logical fallacies, you would comprehend philosophy, you would challenge the assertions made by any cultic group that you encounter. No matter what happened to you, no matter how it looked, no matter if you were popular or not, whether your YouTube channel got 3 viewers or 3,000 viewers on a video, heck, you might even do it without using YouTube videos. YouTube videos might be a last-ditch resort. What you might do is you might point out that they're all just world views anyway, and every last one of them is wrong. So, why do celebrities in the United States assume that people want to chase them anyway? That's an American problem. Now we're going to point out cultural differences here. Why is that an American problem? Because in Hollywood and California, they have stars lined up on the street. People get their Hollywood Walk of Fame. They have paparazzi going to their houses, telling people in newspapers going back decades the size, consistency, and colour of the fucking diarrhea that the celebrity's fucking done. That's not how Australia works. That's not how every other country works. There might be variations on that theme in each country, but it's not the fucking same. Culturally, Australia and America couldn't be more different when it comes to that. And this social media crap has probably confused some people. But that long-standing tradition of everyone shit stinks, which is an Australian one, has contributed enormously to the rejection of MAGA, which, being associated with all of that through the memetics of the situation, meant that a vote for Clive Palmer was a vote for the celebrity culture that chases celebrities down the street and tells people what they had for breakfast and what colour the shit was when it came out. Australians usually reject that stuff. They reject it. So, you find parasocial relationships in Australia, they're usually related to Kabbalah or domestic violence. They're not usually related to celebrity worship. That's an American thing. Australians don't give a flying fuck what your social status is, how much money you've got, if you're a uber powerful magician even. They don't care. They'll bring you down to size just because they can. Australia's issue is tall poppy syndrome. You see, they hate hierarchy so much that anytime someone looks better than them, they'll bring them down to their size. So that sort of toxic hierarchy type of thing about one person's insecurities is projected as the reality of someone else's opinions is an issue in society more generally. That part you can blame on humanity more generally, not just one individual. Misperceiving your opinions as someone else's is commonplace. However, if you happen to be in a Kabbalistic situation where you had not self-spirits, or as Buddhism calls them, the avatars, then maybe they would be expressing their opinions and you wouldn't be expressing your own. And it's, as always, up to the audience to discern fact from fiction, and truth from lies. May the can't be with you.